So welcome to another video. This video is all about the fact that I have decided finally I'm going to destroy and take down the DIY shed pond. It's been working okay, but it's not really, I don't think it needs to stay. I'll tell you about the problems in a minute. Basically, a while ago, you may have seen a video, it was maybe a year ago now, I decided I wanted to put a pond together that was going to go in my shed. Basically, my partner said to me, you can have the shed is yours, and that led me to think, how can I make it have as much water in as possible to store goldfish? So I've got some pallets, and just like everything else I do, I wanted to do it as cheap as possible because, well, it's nice to make sure you're not spending as much money. So I thought if I get some pallets, I can build a frame. And it took a while, you know, I collected the pallets off various different people's houses, that kind of thing, just making sure that I had the right sizes and ones that were strong enough. I wanted to have some that maybe I could slot insulation in between in the future. I had originally come up with all these different ideas which led me to do this. One idea was to build a pond down the side of my house, which is like a long thin pond, making sure that I basically utilise that space that you get often in these terraced houses when you can't there's not a lot of room. So I thought that would be a good way to do it. And then finally had a tub idea, and then I settled on the idea for inside the shed. I did a little mock-up, and the mock-up meant that I could have one pump running both of the ponds. Basically, it flowed from the outside into the pond, and then it went out the shed walls into the main pond. And the whole idea for this pond was so that I could keep top view ranchu, which is probably one of my favourite fish. So I set about building it, and this is the first time I'd sort of really done anything using plumbing that connects with liner, that kind of thing. So I did get a lot of silicone everywhere, but I managed to create really what I was after, which was a couple of outflows that were going to go from this liner that I got. It's a pretty cheap liner, got a few cottony coir parts, and I wanted to create a pipe that went down to the bottom as well to remove waste from the bottom. And also, if the water level got too high, I mean, it would only ever reach the top of the plumbing, because then it would flow over the top, and yes, if there's any blockages at the bottom or anything. But yeah, after a bit of building, you may have seen this video before, just doing a bit of a recap here obviously, but and it did end up quite long, ended up, you know, having enough room and flowing out into the main pond. So this is the pond outside, you can see the black pipes there, and it flowed from the inside out. The whole idea was really just to try and use that space, and this is what I wanted to end up with. You can see the original kind of idea, and this is what I ended up with. So I think it worked. I think it looked how it was supposed to. I managed to keep some plants in it in the summer. It was quite bright in that shed, and it was quite strong flow, so I did adjust the flow into it, but it was a nice home for, especially to keep fish also in the winter out the frost. As I said before, I'd be keeping a top view ranchu in there. So that's the end of how I made it, how I created the indoor shed pond, and it was a really cheap way to make a big volume of water. So it worked. I was really happy with it. I popped in the ranchu along with some spawning nets, or the cheerleaders, pom-poms actually, that the fish I was using for the fish to try and spawn on, and it was a nice home for them. The only issue I found for me, there was a couple of issues. One of them was the fact that it had not as much natural sunlight as being outdoors. That was number one. Number two was how strong the flow was, but I did manage to sort that out. And number three was how much detritus collected at the bottom of it. The waste wasn't removed very easily from the bottom of the pond. The fish would, I mean, here they've just gone in, so it's nice and clear, but it would collect, and the long pipe that we saw a minute ago when I was building it, that went down from the outflow, didn't work. It didn't pull the water from the bottom as strong as I thought it would. So we had this collection of detritus on the bottom, which I then had to manually suck out, which wasn't ideal. But the fish had enough depth to stay in it in the winter. They had enough space. They fed easily in it. So I do a little underwater shot now, and that's, you can see I added on to the end of the pipe a kind of T-shaped pipe, which stopped the flow being as insane. But this is only after a day or so, and you can see the detritus at the bottom isn't really moving to one side and being sucked up as I'd imagined it to. I did try and make it sloped on the bottom, so it did slope down to the centre sort of poles, but you know, it got a lot worse than this. This was really not bad at all, to be honest, but that pipe there didn't really suck up the water. It kind of all went out of a higher level, a higher pipe. So yeah, unfortunately I did decide that it was time for it to go. So the next step was I guess, to clean it down, and you could see there was a lot of rubbish that came off the side of it. Another thing was this particular pond liner didn't end up growing a kind of a good layer of algae, is what I'd call it. My rubber EDPM liner ended up with a really nice layer of algae on it, where you didn't see the black as much, and this one was all plasticky. It wasn't a good liner to start with. So I decided I wanted to do something else in the shed. I'd been given that space by my partner. It's my shed now. So one thing I thought was that I could have a big Laguna tub in there. I've seen these at the pet shop before, and I could try and use it not only to store some fish, like maybe when they're spawning and stuff, because that was another reason to have the shed pond. It was when the fish were spawning, I could separate the females. I thought maybe if I had a tub, I could use it as not only a tub to store fish in, but one end of it where I'm pointing, could become an actual filter. I could sort of use alpha grog and different media. So I thought, okay, maybe I need a smaller tub to go in the larger tub, and that could be something that I could maybe drill holes in and create this kind of almost DIY filter, which may come at a later date. So I had a look around, and while I was there, had a look at some pond plants, and this was a little sketch I drew up of what I was thinking. So basically a smaller tub inside a larger tub, and with some kind of media in it, very simple drawing as you can see there. So the pipe comes in, and maybe some egg crate stopping, some filter floss, or some sponges, and just had a little think about how I could do this. What could I create that had not only a filter space, but also space for fish to be housed. Now, these big tubs aren't cheap. It's me spending a bit of money for once in my life. It's not me going and finding these things, although saying that, I did look on Facebook Marketplace and places like that, trying to get it as cheap as possible. But I just wanted to work out kind of a combination. This one obviously didn't fit. I'd have to go for a smaller size tub. This one is hopefully one that would fit. You can see they come in different sizes. They had them at my local, I think it was a Maidenhead Aquatic. And you can see that one slots in there nicely. So that could be a little idea for the future. But I definitely had made the decision by this point that the indoor shed pond had to go. There wasn't enough room to store things in my shed, because it had to be a working shed as well, not just a fish shed. Some bikes and things, and obviously I've got a little one now, which I was collecting various different garden toys and scooters, and that was taking up a lot of room, and the shed seemed a bit, well, impractical really. After having another look at all the pond plants and deciding that the fish would probably destroy them, so wasn't going to try that summer. It's something that I might try this summer, actually, plant up the DIY pond. Had another look at these tubs just to make sure I understood the pricing, and while I'm at the shop I always look at the fish. So we had some actually really nice black ranchu here, really good wens on these, and the back curvatures seemed quite nice. They seemed quite high quality fish really. I like the larger tails on ranchu compared to the kind of really small little mini tails you get nowadays. So these ones really reminded me of some fish I used to have actually. Also, sitting at home, I did manage to knock up a really quick model of what I was trying to think about. It might be that I still had an indoor shed pond, but this time it was smaller, really. It was smaller. It was a tub. It could sit on a table, maybe under the table I could have storage. And these were some little pond baskets, maybe I could store some alpha grog in. You can see there a bit of jack mat, you can see as the blue thing symbolised there, or filter floss, allowing the water to flow through. So the pond was ticking along nicely. All the fish were actually outside at this point, and this was because I decided that I wanted to give those top view ranchu some natural sunlight. There just wasn't enough in that shed. I didn't want it to be a permanent place. I don't think housing fish permanently indoors without a good light is really a good idea in my opinion. I just think that natural sunlight is so good for them. So, I mean, to be honest, I don't keep any fish at the moment in aquariums really because of that reason. I think they just do better in ponds. But you can see here I had my little fry, which I did a video on last video actually. And in this video you can see I've actually still got the double-tailed one, or the pinky it turned out to be, which ended up unfortunately passing away. But this year's another year, and I'll try to set myself up ready for success this year in terms of breeding. Like I say, if I have this little space indoors, I can separate the female when she needs it, but not house the fish indoors permanently. You can see the water's got a bit grim there, not the best. And again, that's another reason I kind of mainly thought I would remove this. At the moment, still got that filter flowing in from outdoors, but it wasn't quite what I was after. You can see it was forming algae on the side, but it didn't ever stick. It was kind of quite a thin layer of almost white, and you can see all the detritus there at the bottom. It didn't work how I'd imagined with the water being sucked up that pipe. It was not ideal, but it worked to some level, but not how I'd like it. So I decided that it was time to take it down. So in order to carry on having the filter inside, I thought I'm going to have to sort of think about some plumbing. This is plumbing both for the final actual tub that's going to go inside the shed, but also I had to kind of think of some kind of plumbing temporarily to sort out the filter being able to stay inside the shed and then flow out the wall. So taking off that pipe work, you can see actually how much detritus gets stuck at the bottom of that. Just doesn't work. So it's time for that to be moved on. You can see it all in the water there actually. It was creating a kind of almost like a sump. I keep marine as well, marine tank, and sometimes at the bottom of that you get all the sediment that's left over after it's not all flowing through nicely. So the time had come. I knew what I was going to do with that space. I could still have a small tub that would house the fish. I could turn it into a filter potentially, a little project for me. I like my projects. It wouldn't cost too much money, and I was obviously going to try and save this wood as well. Got some methylene blue on it, but it doesn't matter. That's just part of keeping goldfish, I think. So I managed to take it all apart and wanted to try and keep the liner as best I could, so it's delicate. You never know when I might use it again in the future, but all the fittings went into a box. I can keep those for a future project, and it was just a case of gradually dismantling it. Felt a bit sad, you know, I'd built it with my dad, but I also and then I saw that, just in case you don't like spiders, so I should have probably pre-warned you. But that was a good one. Made a little home behind the shed, and it was a good spider, I thought. So yeah, I started taking it apart. I made it with my dad, and I made the outside one with my dad as well, so it's not too bad. Lots of OSB board that I could use again, so I kept that and lined the shed with it when I eventually get around to doing that. But that's what I ended up with, my very small garden full of lots of stuff. Wasn't in the shed anymore, so I had to make sure it wasn't staying in the garden for too long. bits of old carpet, all of that. So it did leave a big space though, big space for a new filter system, a new little mini tank, and bikes and kids stuff, which is, I need to be a bit more sensible in that respect. I might have the pipework flowing out like this. It seems a bit long-winded, a bit convoluted to actually work. I did set it all up and open up some old solvent cement I had. After looking in that solvent cement, I realised that it had all gone hard, so I didn't end up using that in the end. It all turned into a bit of a kind of jelly, so that wasn't going to work. Well, it could have maybe worked, but I didn't want to trust it, so I thought I'll just wait and get some more in the future. Expiry date was, yeah, well and truly out. I think I'd only just bought that from the shop as well, so that's not good. But yeah, decided that there was more room here now, which was great. That's what I was after. Might have to get some more rubber matting actually to go down that floor to make it look a bit more neat, and the whole space had become quite mucky. The idea was that I was going to keep it as a fish space. But yeah, that's where the tub would go. It's going to give me that room I want. Now I guess the job was to get rid of all that rubbish that had been left behind. So I popped it in the car, went over to the local recycling centre, which I always love doing. Makes me feel like I'm getting rid of some stuff, and there we go. Laid out the pond liner to dry, and hopefully I can use it for some more projects. So, you know, if this is something you want to see me continue with, my little DIY filter, and feel free to follow along. I've got lots of stuff happening this summer, lots of little mini projects, so thanks for watching.